Russians, Ukrainians fight block by block in eastern city. Russian troops pushed farther into a key eastern Ukrainian city and fought street by street with Kyiv's forces Monday in a battle the mayor said has left the city in ruins and driven tens of thousands of people from. Military analysts painted the fight for Severodonetsk as part of a race against time for the Kremlin. The city is key to Russian efforts to complete the capture of the eastern industrial region of the Donbas quickly, before more Western arms arrive to bolster Ukraine's defense. Weapons from the West have already helped Kyiv's forces thwart a Russian advance on the capital in the early weeks of the war. That failure forced Moscow to withdraw, regroup, and pursue the more limited objective of seizing the Donbas, where Moscow-backed separatists already held swaths of territory and have been fighting Ukrainian troops for. The Kremlin has reckoned that it can't afford to waste time and should use the last chance to extend the separatist-controlled territory because the arrival of Western weapons in Ukraine could make it impossible, Ukrainian military analyst told Asia Donna. But in a potential setback for Ukraine, President Joe Biden appeared to dismiss reports that the U.S. was considering sending long-range rocket systems to the country. In addition to pleading for weapons from allies, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has also repeatedly insisted that European countries and others must punish Russia for its aggression, with sanctions and embargoes on Moscow's lucrative. In a video address Monday to European Union leaders, Zelensky asked the 27 nations of the bloc to target Russian oil exports, so Moscow feels the price for what it is doing against Ukraine. The leaders are considering an embargo on Russian oil, but struggling to find consensus. Russia has also sought to use its energy exports to its advantage, cutting off natural gas to a handful of European countries in what was seen as an effort to punish and divide the West over its support for Ukraine. In its latest move, Russian state gas giant Gazprom said it will halt gas supplies to Dutch gas trader Gazprom starting Tuesday. The Russian military's focus on Severodonetsk has already left the city completely ruined, Mayor Alexander Stryak said. Artillery barrages have destroyed critical infrastructure and damaged 90% of the buildings, and power and communications have been largely cut to a city that was once home to 100,000 people. The number of victims is rising every hour, but we are unable to count the dead and the wounded amid the street fighting, Stryak told the Associated Press in a phone interview, adding that Moscow's troops advanced a few more blocks toward the city. He said that only about 12,000 to 13,000 residents remain, sheltering in basements and bunkers to escape the Russian bombardment, a situation that recalls the siege of Mariupol that trapped residents and led to some of the worst suffering of the war. Stryak estimated that 1,500 civilians have died in his city since the war began, from Russian attacks as well as from the dire conditions, including a lack of medicine or medical treatment. More than 20,000 are feared dead in Mariupol. A 32-year-old French journalist, Frédéric Leclerc-Kimhov, died Monday near Severodonetsk when he was hit by shrapnel from shelling while covering Ukrainians evacuating the area, according to his employer, French broadcast. Beyond long sieges of cities, Russia's troops have also been accused of carrying out targeted killings and other atrocities in areas they briefly held around Kyiv early in the. On Monday, prosecutors submitted the first rape case of the war to a court, the last step before a trial begins. The 31-year-old Russian soldier, who is accused of killing a man and raping his wife in Budenka, a village northeast of Kyiv, will be tried in absentia, officials said. Meanwhile, the Ukrainian military said Russian forces reinforced their positions on the northeastern and southeastern outskirts of Severodonetsk, 145 kilometers, 90 miles, south of the Russian border in an area that is the last pocket of Ukrainian government control in Luhansk. Luhansk Governor Serhiy Haidai said the Russians were also pushing toward nearby Lysychansk. In addition to the journalist, 2 civilians were killed in the latest Russian shelling, he said. 3 civilians were also killed Monday in the Donetsk region, which together with Luhansk makes up the Donbas, the governor said. Authorities in Kharkiv reported one dead in the latest shelling of Ukraine's second-largest city. The Russian advance in Severodonetsk and Lysychansk on either side of the strategically important Siversky Donetsk River is part of an all-out push, Zhdanov said. The intensity of the latest fighting and the fact that Russia has poured troops in from their far east have come as a surprise to the Ukrainians, who are trying to hold out until more weapons can arrive, Zhdanov said. On Monday, Biden told reporters that there are no plans for the U.S. to send long-range rocket systems to Ukraine, amid reports that the move is being considered. Dmitry Medvedev, the deputy head of Russia's Security Council, said that was a reasonable decision. He said that otherwise, if our cities come under attack, the Russian armed forces would fulfill their threat and strike the centers where such criminal decisions are. Medvedev added that some of them aren't in Kyiv. Russian pressure also continued in the south on Monday. Defense Ministry spokesman Major General Igor Konashenkov said an artillery strike on a shipyard in the southern port of Mykolaiv destroyed Ukrainian armored vehicles parked in the Kherson region. The Russia-installed deputy head of the regional administration, Kirill Stremeltsov, told Russia's TASS state news agency that grain from last year's harvest is being delivered to Russian buyers, adding that obviously there is a lot of grain. Ukraine has accused Russia of looting grain from territories its forces hold, and the U.S. has alleged Moscow is jeopardizing global food supplies by preventing Ukraine from exporting its harvest. Russia, meanwhile, has pressed the West to lift sanctions against it as it seeks to shift the blame for the growing food crisis, which has led to skyrocketing prices in Africa. Zelensky urged France not to succumb to such blackmail as the Ukrainian president met Monday with French Foreign Minister Catherine Colonna. EU leaders, divided over Russia oil embargo, seek a solution. European Union leaders struggled Monday to agree to impose an oil embargo on Russia, as Ukraine's president urged them to set aside their differences and endorse a long-delayed package of sanctions aimed at piling more economic pressure on Moscow. The EU has already imposed 5 rounds of sanctions on Russia over its war. It's targeted more than 1,000 people, including Russian President Vladimir Putin and top government officials, as well as pro-Kremlin oligarchs, banks, the coal sector. But a 6th package of measures, announced on May 4, has been held up by concerns over oil supplies. The EU gets about 40% of its natural gas and 25% of its oil from Russia, and the divisions are embarrassing the 27-nation trading bloc and exposing the limits of its ambitions. Addressing the EU leaders Monday by video link in a 10-minute message, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky urged them to end internal arguments that only prompt Russia to put more and more pressure on the whole of Europe. He said the sanctions package must be agreed on, it needs to be effective, including, on, oil, so that Moscow feels the price for what it is doing against Ukraine and the rest of Europe. Only then, Zelensky said, will Russia be forced to start seeking peace. It's not the first time he has demanded that the EU target Russia's lucrative energy sector and deprive Moscow of billions of dollars each day in supply payments. But Hungary is leading a group of EU countries, along with Slovakia, the Czech Republic and Bulgaria, that rely heavily on Russian oil and can't afford to turn off the pumps. Hungary gets more than 60% of its oil from Russia and 85% of its natural gas. Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban was adamant on arriving at the 2-day summit in Brussels that a deal was not in sight, while Czech Prime Minister Petr Fiala suggested that delaying oil sanctions against Russia could be a "we're ready to get rid of our dependence on Russia's energy sources, but we're not able to do it in a short term," Fiala said. According to several diplomats, leaders will try to reach a deal for an EU embargo on Russian oil brought in by sea by the end of the year that would cover more than 2/3 of the EU's oil imports. Orban said he could support the new sanctions if Hungary's oil supply security is guaranteed. Hungary and Slovakia depend on Russian oil that comes through the Soviet-era Druzhba pipeline. The problem with hitting sea-transported Russian oil is that countries like Belgium, Germany and the Netherlands, which are most reliant on that form, would suffer a surge in oil prices, distorting competition because Hungary would still be purchasing cheap. Latvian Prime Minister Krišjānis Kariņš urged his EU counterparts to get over their differences on oil, saying that member countries are getting a little bogged down in all of the details and we're forgetting the big. It's only money, and Ukrainians are paying with their lives, he said. Only when Russia is defeated can we in Europe feel safe. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz was cautiously optimistic. Everything that I hear makes it sound as if a consensus could be reached and, sooner or later, it will be, he told reporters. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen all but ruled out a breakthrough at the summit, saying, "My expectations are low that it will be solved in the next 48 hours." If adopted, the new sanctions package would also include an asset freeze and travel ban on individuals. Russia's biggest bank, Sberbank, would be excluded from SWIFT, the major global system for financial transfers. 3 big Russian state-owned broadcasters will also be prevented from distributing their content in the EU. The 2-day summit will also focus on continued EU financial support to Ukraine, probably the endorsement of a €9 billion, $9.7 billion, tranche of assistance, and on military help and war crimes investigations. The issue of food security will be on the table Tuesday, with the leaders set to encourage their governments to speed up work on solidarity lanes to help Ukraine export grain and other produce. Some protesters gathered outside EU buildings Monday before the summit, holding signs like "No to Russian oil and gas."